Sorry, if there are no amendments to the agenda, then the agenda stands approved as written. Next slide, please. So before I go into my chairman's report, I want to take a moment of silence to recognize the life and legacy of former DC Fire Chief Kenneth Allaby. For those on the call who may be unaware, former Fire Chief Allaby, he passed away last month. He was a proud Ward 7 resident who lived in the Benning Ridge community. He served as a former at-large committeeman on the DC Democratic State Committee. And in his free time, he would spend it working with the students at Bard High School. He truly will be missed. I also want to send my deepest condolences to Mrs. Constance Woody, who has been a lifelong Ward 7 community leader, an active member within the Ward 7 Democrats for decades. She lost her husband earlier this month. The funeral was held on Thursday, but you know, it's a very sad time, and we really encourage folks on the call to please keep both families in your prayers. It is never a good thing to hear about the passing of anyone, but especially our beloved Ward 7 leaders. However, I do take comfort in knowing that their legacy will live on through the work that we're doing in our community. And speaking of leaders, some folks may have already heard, but our second vice chair, Kareem D. Marsh, who has stepped down from his seat. Kareem has played an instrumental role in the success of our organization. And even though he's no longer officially with the organization, he's one phone call away. We appreciate you, Kareem, and we're wishing you nothing but success in your future endeavors. I do plan to announce his replacement later on during the call. Now on to the official chairman's report. I know it's been quite some time since we've had a virtual meeting, and since the last couple of meetings have been hybrid, it's going to be hard going back to completely virtual. So I'm going to have to figure something out. Nonetheless, I'm extremely proud to share that the Ward 7 Democrats hosted the first citywide hybrid candidate forum. We kicked off part one of our two-part series on February the 26th. Which we heard from candidates who are running to be the next chairperson and at-large council member for the DC City Council. Following that event, we had part two of our two-part candidate series, which was held on March the 5th, which featured candidates who are running to be the next Attorney General and Mayor of the District of Columbia. And I'm super excited to share that every candidate we reached out to, they joined our candidates forum, and we had over 1,500 residents who paid attention to that event. So half of those residents came to the actual event. The other residents tuned in online. Now, those aren't the only races that are happening right now. Last month, I encouraged Ward 7 residents to get involved and to consider running to be the next Ward 7 committee man and committee woman. So for those who may be unaware with these positions, every 4 years, an election is held to elect 2 committee men and 2 committee women of Ward 7 who will serve on the DC Democratic State Committee. Now, as elected committee men and committee women for Ward 7, one will play an instrumental role in advocating for pressing issues such as statehood, redistricting, ranked choice voting, as well as support the implementation of various policies within the DC Democratic State Committee, which ultimately works towards upholding our democratic values. Now, to date, 7 individuals from Ward 7 have turned in their petitions to run for these seats, which is extremely exciting. And initially, I asked candidates who were running for these positions to submit a 30-second to 1-minute video just introducing yourselves. I asked for that by April the 1st, which will give residents an opportunity to know of everyone who's running. And thus far, I received 4 videos. So if you're a candidate and you haven't submitted your video thus far, please submit it at info@ward7dems.org. You still have time, and the videos will be shared at our April meeting. Lastly, I was considering appointing a nomination committee to oversee the endorsement process. However, the elected body has instead chosen to endorse whoever is victorious in the Democratic primary. And with that being said, we will continue to focus on what has been our charge as the Ward 7 Democrats organization, which is to increase voter turnout, voter participation, and voter engagement leading up to the Democratic primary, which will be held in June. So to organize our efforts, we are extremely excited to roll out the Ward 7 Dems on the Run. So with that being said, we have a video to show you. Next slide, please.
Can you hear the video?
Very, very, very slightly. Could you turn up the volume?
Yep.
If possible.
Boom.
In which the ward. Well, hello, Ward 7. It is me again, your chairperson here with the Ward 7 Democrats organization. So you probably are wondering, what is the Ward 7 Dems on the Run all about? Well, let me tell you. The Ward 7 Dems on the Run is a get out the vote campaign in which the Ward 7 Democrats will be focusing our efforts to increase voter turnout, voter participation, and voter engagement leading up to the Democratic primary, which will be held in June. So over the next couple of months or so, we will be canvassing every precinct across Ward 7, hosting meet and greets, candidate forums, voter registration drives, but most importantly, we want to hear from you. At the end of the day, this is your ward and your voice matters the most. So do us a favor, stay connected with us by following us on social media or visiting our website for more information to come.
Thank you so much, Recording Secretary. And at this time, that concludes my chairman's report.
Well, hello, Ward 7. It is me. Well, hello, Ward 7. It is me again, your chairperson.
There we go.
Cool. Next agenda item is we will have our budget report from our treasurer. I'm sorry, no, we won't. We will have our recording secretary report.
Hello, everybody. Good to see all of you. I'm going to make it quick because our last meeting, it seemed like it was a very long time ago, but it was also very quick. So let me run through it really quickly. We did reach a quorum and this was from the January meeting. So we did have a quorum. We had a redistricting update by Commissioner Blair. We also had a presentation from Ryan O'Leary about Initiative 81. We also had a few community announcements, some from Ebony Rose Thompson, and from our last treasurer's report as of January's meeting in the bank, we had $5,702.19. We also we did community announcements, and then we adjourned the meeting. Mr. Chair, that is my report, and I move that we accept the minutes as read.
Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Any discussion? Hearing none, the motion has been moved and properly seconded. We can do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Hearing none, the motion stands approved. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Recording Secretary. Next agenda item is the treasurer's report. I'll transition to our treasurer, Mr. Brandon Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report will cover the period of January 1 until in part March 25th. So as it relates to that time period, we've raised a total of $1,045, which relates to about 10 total contributions for an average of about $104 per person. We've expended during that time period, that's going to cover media, committee expenses, et cetera, $1,671. And so to date, we currently have a present bank balance of just over $4,600, of which also puts us on par for the year, which represents roughly the amount that we would be looking to have saved at this point for the year. So we are most certainly in a place where we are looking for additional donations and contributions. We are encouraging everyone, if you can give anywhere between if you can give $15 before the end of this presentation, that will go a long way to us being able to help build and reinforce the infrastructure of the organization. So total, we have raised just over $1,000, nearly $1,100 since March 25th. And we wanted to give you really up to the minute, the latest and greatest as it relates to information that we have. The chart to the right will really give you the month by month breakdown of really the ebbs and flows of what donations look like. We did have a slight low at the end of January and through the really most of February. And so we're truly encouraging everyone to make this a recurring activity. Anything that you can contribute will go a long way in helping us to reinforce the chairman's visions and campaigns of the organization, with ensuring that we're able to engage in voter turnout and all of the activities related to the association, and ultimately propelling the community forward. That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Treasurer. At this point in time, we will hear from any committee members who want to report out on their committee. Next slide, please.
Hi, I think Wendell is now the right time for me
Yes,
to
yes.
just checking. In my 2 minutes, I'll just briefly introduce myself and then give an update on statehood. For those I haven't met yet, my name is Andrea Thomas, and I sit on the DC Democratic State Committee as a member, as a Ward 6 committee woman, but since January, I have been a very proud member of Ward 7. So I'm here to give an update and my role on the DC Democratic Party. I co-lead the Statehood Committee, and we have regular monthly working group meetings. And so my co-chair is listed here. And what I thought I would do on the next slide is just give a very brief overview on what does the Democratic Party in DC do for statehood? Can we go to the next slide? So the statehood strategy. So what do we do? There's so many organizations. There's DC Vote, there's Neighbors United for DC Statehood. There's a plethora of organizations working to help give us this right, the equality of voting rights. The DC Democratic Party strategy is to impact Democrats. So we want to make sure that statehood is part of the Democratic Party platform at a national level. That has happened. It has not always been true, but thanks to hard work, it has happened. We want to make sure that every Democrat in Congress co-sponsors the statehood bills, HR 51 and S 51. We do not have this yet. There are 4 senators who are Democrats or caucus Democrats who have not signed on to DC statehood. If we had all the senators, we could actually have a vote. We don't have that today. So that's part of the strategy. We want to make sure that we have every Democratic candidate signed on for DC statehood at every level, including local. So we have a policy called no donation without representation, which is that everybody, anytime you're volunteering for or asking or giving money to a Democratic candidate, you're saying, have you signed the DC statehood pledge? Have you committed publicly to DC statehood? Otherwise, how can we help you get elected if you can't help us have our democratic rights in Congress? And then we advocate, we try to educate and advocate with Democrats in DC and beyond. So I wanted to give a brief update, and so we hear a lot about statehood. It's been an advocacy effort that's been going on for a long time, but the DC Democratic Party is very active in this. So I'll put the link in the chat as well. But the one final call out I will make is that there are some House Republicans in Congress today who are threatening that when they take power again, if they take power again in Congress, to repeal DC home rule. This was a statement made in the last month by Representative Andrew Clyde of Georgia. And so if the question is, why care about statehood now? Why should I be acting for it now? That is yet another reason to be active. So we welcome anybody. I welcome any questions, and thank you for the time, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thomas, for that committee report out on statehood. Next slide, please. So we don't have any old business. However, I do want to go over new business. As previously mentioned in my chairman's report, I mentioned that I'm going to appoint the new, or share who the new second vice chair will be. And at this point in time, I would like to appoint Mr. Eric Rogers to serve in the role as our new second vice chair. Let me remind you all of who he is, as well as how he has served the ward. He oversaw the 2021 Ward 7 annual convention, where he helped elect new leadership for the organization. He's a native Washingtonian. He currently lives in the Hillcrest community. He serves currently on the Ward 7 redistricting task force. He has been the chairman of the Ward 6 Democrats at one point in time, and he has served in a plethora of DC government positions during his professional career. So, with that being said, I would ask if our Sergeant at Arms.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a motion.
That.
I move that Mr. Eric Rogers be appointed as the second vice chair of the Ward 7 Democrats.
Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we will take a voice vote. All in favor, you can say aye. All opposed, you can say nay.
Aye.
Aye.
Well, it seems like the motion stands approved. Thank you so much, Eric, for stepping up and your willingness to roll your sleeves up and join us as being a member of the executive body. So thank you so much. And at this point in time, we're going to ask the chairperson of the DC Democratic State Committee, Mr. Charles Wilson, if he could officially swear Eric in. Mr. Wilson, are you on the call?
Yes, Mr. Chair, how are you?
I'm doing exceptionally well. How are you?
Good, good. So Mr. Rogers is ready.
I'm ready, Charles.
Second. Raise your right hand and please repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Eric Rogers,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and uphold
that I will support and uphold
the bylaws of the Ward 7 Democrats.
of the Ward 7 Democrat.
I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion.
and I will faithfully discharge
And I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office in which I'm about to enter.
the duties of the office of which I'm about to enter.
Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Eric. Do you have do you want to say a couple of remarks
Yeah,
very briefly?
just a quick thanks to the executive committee, to you, Mr. Chair, for having your confidence in any of the skills that you think that I can bring to the table. Definitely want to give Ward 7 my best and Ward 7 Democrats my best. So my knowledge and experience are always at your disposal and the community's disposal. So again, thank you for the appointment, and I look forward to working with everyone.
We thank you so much, and we look forward to working with you as well. Moving right along, next agenda item. So at this point in time, we're going to have our coach or the chairperson for the redistricting or for the Ward 7 redistricting task force, Commissioner Tamara Blair, if she can kind of give an update on where we are in the redistricting process. The only reason that I didn't formally introduce Tamara because she's not a stranger to the Ward 7 Democrats. She's an ANC commissioner in 7D. She lives in, oh my gosh, she lives at, I'm sorry, Tamara, don't kick my butt. She lives in,
Kingman Park.
Thank you. It was on the tip of my tongue. She lives in Kingman Park, and she has been working her butt off to make sure that this redistricting process is one that accommodates all the needs of the residents in Ward 7. So with that being said, Chairperson, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Ward 7 Dems. I am co-chair of the Ward 7 ANC Redistricting Task Force. My co-chair is Joel Castone from ANC 7F, 7F07 to be exact. He's not with us today, but I'm just gonna try to get everyone up to speed on the process that we've been going through, where we are right now, because we still have a little bit more work to do. And then where are things going after we're finished on April 1st. So just to start off with just kind of a general briefing of what we had to work with. All 8 wards across the district are in the process of redrawing lines, boundaries for their ANCs and SMDs. Specifically for Ward 7, there were roughly 50, I think 53 people that expressed an interest in taking on this monumental task. From that number, Councilmember Gray appointed 19 individuals. And so that was a combination of commissioners, former commissioners, civic association officers, and just general advocates and leaders within the Ward 7 community. So in drafting recommended boundaries, each council member formed their own task force for their ward, but our at-large council members were also given the opportunity to appoint someone to each of the task forces throughout the district. So what we were aiming for, and I think we did really well in Ward 7, we were looking for representation from all racial and ethnic minorities, women, and from all geographical areas. The requirement that all had to meet was they had to be a resident of the ward in which they were being appointed to the task force. So one of the major things that we are being held to is the idea that the SMD populations have to be between 1,900 and 2,100 residents. And our numbers that we're using are based off the 2020 census data. So next time census comes around, it maybe give you a different perspective of how important it is that you encourage your neighbors and friends and family, particularly in Ward 7, to participate in the census. That's all we have to go on when we're redrawing boundaries for ANCs and SMDs. There's no minimum or maximum SMDs for a particular ANC, but most ANCs have a range of 5 to 9 SMDs right now, single member districts. And again, what we recommend to the council is not binding. It's merely a recommendation. As you may have seen during the ward redistricting, things changed from what was recommended to what was actually accepted and voted on by the council. So we started off with a kickoff meeting January 20th, and then we followed up with 3 what we call listening sessions, where the task force specifically wanted to dedicate time to hear from our residents as far as what they were looking for, what's important to them. A couple of things that came out of that was that the civic associations felt they had been left out in terms of being considered. So this time around, we made an extra effort to make sure we could, as much as possible, avoid splitting civic associations between ANCs. I think that turned out pretty well. And in most cases, we gave it our best. So after we had the listening sessions, we followed up with 3 roundtable sessions specifically for the task force members to discuss, review all the maps, potential maps for the recommendation in a public setting. So the first 3 meetings were primarily for the public. The last 3 have been primarily for the task force as working sessions. We have one more coming up on Monday, the 28th. The public is welcome to attend. At that point, we'll be focusing on what has boiled down to be one map, knowing that, it's not going to be a perfect map. No map is going to be perfect, but it is the map that we will take a vote on Monday, or that's the plan. So the mapping system that we're using, it's a district-wide mapping system that anybody can have an account, open an account, create a map. But at this point, we have closed all maps. We're no longer accepting new maps, but that doesn't mean you can't participate in this process. We are obligated to produce a report. It's due to the subcommittee by April 1st. And then after that point, there will be a set of hearings. The first one is already scheduled for April 7th, Thursday, April 7th at noon. So you can participate in that process once you've had an opportunity to review the map submitted or recommended by the Ward 7 task force. The maps we have reviewed have been been based on or developed with the principles of redistricting for ANCs and SMDs as handed down by the subcommittee. It's a very similar set of principles that was used for the ward redistricting. I'll go over a couple of the major principles, some of the principles are law that we're obligated to do, and then some were created by the subcommittee for us to consider as we're going through this process. So for single member districts, there were 5 principles for redistricting: equal representation, minority voting power, compact and contiguous districts, and preserving communities of interest. All of that based on whole census blocks. So what that means is all of our ANCs, SMDs are broken down in population-wise according to census blocks. It's highly, highly recommended that we stick to the census blocks because the mapping system does not permit splits. And if anything is split, it requires an explanation in writing why it was split and has to be justified. The ANCs have a similar list of principles: compact and contiguous districts, preserving communities of interest. ANC areas and ward boundaries didn't really come into play with this, but that's about splitting ANCs across ward boundaries. We're not dealing with that in this case. In Ward 7, we don't have that situation. There were two things that the subcommittee handed down. They're not law, but they felt it was important that we take into consideration continuity and stability. So in terms of continuity and stability, they wanted recommended or suggested that we avoid radical and unnecessary changes given the political and social volatility of the pandemic. Then the other thing is that it was want everyone to understand that the recommendations that are coming down in the month of April don't impact the current commissions as they are for this year. They will go into effect. We needed to have this done for the primary elections that are coming up. But if there's a sitting commissioner, it doesn't impact their position, their role within the ANC, because we won't change commissioners until January 2023. So where we are now is we have one more meeting, the 28th, which is Monday. And then, like I said, on the 7th, that'll be the first opportunity for the council to hold a hearing at 12 noon. And if you want to participate after reviewing the submission or the recommendation from the task force, you can do that by testifying before the council subcommittee. You can submit a testimony if you cannot be there and participate in the Zoom. And you can also contact Council Member Gray's office directly and let them know what you think of the redistricting recommendation. That's all I have, but I will say that some of the task force members are in attendance today. We've all put in a lot of time and we won't get this opportunity again for 10 years. So this is important work that we're doing, and I appreciate everyone's effort that's going into this. And that's my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair. Before I open the floor for a couple of questions from residents, I just wanted to know, you mentioned that the next meeting will be held on Monday. Do you know what time on Monday?
Monday at 6 p.m. It's a Zoom meeting. I don't have the link handy, but any of the task force members, if you've got that link handy, can you post that in the chat for our participants today?
Copy. Thank you so much. And at this point in time, we'll open the floor up to residents if they have a question or two. Great. Looks like there's no questions. Thank you again, Co-Chair Blair. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So before I introduce our next guest speaker, I quickly just want to tell you guys a little bit about her. Monica Evans is the Executive Director at the DC Board of Elections and previously served as their Senior Policy Advisor. She oversees election operations and policy implementations within the District of Columbia. Ms. Evans previously served as the Deputy Director of AmeriCorps at the Corporation for National and Community Service. Ms. Evans began her professional career as a policy program associate with the Maryland Governor's Commission on Service. Ms. Evans holds a Juris Doctor from the University of Maryland of Law and a Bachelor's of Art from the University of Virginia. She is a Ward 7 resident who lives and serves in the Hillcrest community. Welcome, Ms. Evans, to the Ward 7 Democrats meeting.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you for joining us again.
Great. And thank you so much for having me today. It is particularly important for me to be here because, as you mentioned, I am a very proud resident of Ward 7 and have been for 18 years now. I will go into our election plan for the 2022 primary, and then I'll be happy to entertain any questions anyone may have.
Yes, ma'am.
As we all know, the 2020 election presented many challenges as a result of the global pandemic. However, we are very happy that many of the successful practices that we put in place will be able to continue in the 2020 election cycle. So for the June 21st, 2022 primary, we will mail a ballot to every eligible registered voter. We will have vote centers instead of precinct-based voting. So voters will be able to cast a ballot at any vote center in the District of Columbia. We will utilize our mail ballot drop boxes, and voters can vote in person. They can deposit a ballot in a mail ballot drop box, use the United States Postal Service, or they can deposit a ballot at any vote center during early voting and on election day. So we will have 55 mail ballot drop boxes, and 9 of those are in Ward 7. We'll have 40 early vote centers, and 7 of those are in Ward 7, and 90 election day vote centers, and 16 of those are in Ward 7. We have already started election worker training that started on the 22nd of March. And we plan to train between 2,000 and 2,500 election workers for the June primary. We also will engage in a very robust communications plan. And so our informational postcards will begin being mailed in April, and we will have 4 informational postcards as well as the voter guide. We will also use newspaper, radio, and television advertising. And we got a lot of success and positive feedback with our yard signs and door hangers. And so we will do that again. And of course, our effort is to address the digital divide in all of our communication with residents in the district. Just to go over some key dates. So this past Wednesday was the last day to file nominating petitions. And today, the 26th, our nominating petitions will be posted for a 10-day challenge period. And so our offices are open, including weekends, for 10 consecutive days. On Friday, April 29th, we will have our ballot lottery to determine ballot position. And as I mentioned, our voter guide will go out, and the date for that is May 9th. A few other key dates. We do plan to begin mailing ballots on May 16th. Mail ballot drop boxes will open on May 27th. And then the deadline to update voter registration with party affiliation is May 31st. You do not need to request an absentee ballot because we will be mailing a ballot to everyone. However, if you will not be at your registration address and you will be outside of the District of Columbia, you need that ballot mailed someplace other than the address we have on file. The last date to do that will be June 6th. Our early voting period will run June 10 through June 19. Our primary election day, we will have all vote centers open from 7 until 8 p.m. Just one note, there will be no in-person voting on Monday, June 20, and that is to observe the Juneteenth holiday. And essentially our last day to receive any mail ballot back at DCBOE will be June 28th, which is 7 days after the election. So I think that gives a synopsis of the election plan, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Evans, for that robust overview, just sharing with residents what steps are being taken leading up to the Democratic primary. My only question is, due to the fact that Ward 7 has expanded into Ward 6, due to the redistricting process, will additional precincts be added in Ward 7 prior to the Democratic primary of the new territory that we've gained, partially along Cayman Park and Rosedale?
We will not have new precinct designations in place for the primary. As mentioned by the previous speaker, we are still going through the redistricting process, and our process to assign precincts happens after the ANC SMD redistricting process is complete. And so we will not have new precincts. However, based on population numbers and based on the size of the SMDs that are established, it is likely we will have new precincts. Unfortunately, we just will not have those for the primary due to the time districting process.
Great, thank you so much. Well, that concludes my question. At this point in time, we'll take a couple of questions from residents from the audience, if anyone has any.
Mr. Chair, I don't see any hands up at this time. However, Uncle Posey asked if you could put the dates in the chat, and also can you give an update on the status of Initiative 82 being on the June 21st ballot?
Absolutely. We had planned to certify either up or down the initiative on this past Thursday. However, the process includes getting a certain number of petition signatures from at least 5 of the 8 wards. And that has to be met with a 95% confidence rate. When we sent our information to planning, we had to go through several rounds, kind of a back and forth, because the initial results we got from the sampling that Department of Planning did, we were unable to certify either acceptance or rejection in wards 2 and ward 6. And so we had to ask for an additional sample. The additional sample allowed us to certify, and the signatures were accepted for ward 2. However, ward 6, there was still no decision. After another round going back to planning, once again, there was no decision. And right now, what we're having to do is use the entire universe of eligible signatures for our sample. And we will have to test each one of those. And once we go through that process, that will determine whether or not Ward 6 is accepted or rejected. And that is what is in the balance. If Ward 6 is accepted, then we will make a recommendation that Initiative 82 will be on the June ballot. However, if Ward 6 is rejected, then our recommendation will be that it is not on the ballot. There is a challenge to the petition, and so we do have a hearing, I believe it's this Monday at 1 o'clock, to go over the challenge to the petition that has been submitted.
Thank you so much, Ms. Evans.
Yes, and I will put the dates in the chat before I get off.
Any other questions?
I don't see any hands up. Mr. Capozzi asked, why is Department of Planning involved? And there's a question from the first vice chair, will the sampling results be published?
Yes, the results will be made available, and the challengers have asked for the results as well. Department of Planning actually is involved in providing the random sample. So if you look at our regulations, there's a formula to determine whether or not the petition meets the threshold of 95% as far as acceptance. And we typically take a sample of 100 from each of the wards. And that sample is a random sample that is provided to us from Department of Planning. We do not do that. And that's to just have another layer and to ensure that we are not acting independently with the process. And so it does help us to remain neutral in the pulling of that sample.
Perfect. Well, that looks like those are the only questions that we have. Ms. Monica, thanks again. And I look forward to seeing you at the next Hillcrest meeting or in Hillcrest Rec.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will put the dates I mentioned into the chat, But please know I have an open door policy and an open phone policy. And I have residents emailing me about questions they have regarding the election or when they're unsuccessful in getting something resolved. So I provide that always. My direct line is 727-2511. That is not the main line. And anyone can email me at any time at mevans@dcboe.org.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks again. Transitioning, the next slide, please. So as we transition to the next portion of today's meeting, it is with great enthusiasm that I kick off today's annual convention. So for those who may be wondering, what's the purpose of the annual convention? The annual convention serves as an opportunity to provide residents of Ward 7 with an overview of the state of the organization through identifying key successes, areas of opportunities, as well as outlining our future priorities heading into next year. To date, our organization, or rather our administration, has been in office for a little under a year, and we do recognize that while we have made a lot of progress, we still have so much more things to accomplish. Next slide, please. Yes, go on back, please. And so just wanted to show you guys some pictures that recap some of the work that we were able to do this year. Cool. Next slide, please. So with that being said, as elected members of the organization, we have been charged to uphold the mission and purpose of the organization, which is to increase membership of the organization, increase voter turnout and participation, communicate with all segments of the ward, maintain harmony, and promote programs and initiatives that support democratic values. Now, to ensure that we are properly achieving our goals, we have identified 5 key areas in which we have served as our guiding principles to measure success. And those areas include strengthening our organizational infrastructure, increasing voter registration and turnout, advocating for Ward 7 priorities, optimizing communications and community engagement, and then last but not least, cultivating new and existing leaders. Next slide, please. So strengthening our organizational infrastructure continues to be one of our key priorities. We recognize the importance of establishing a solid organizational infrastructure to support the fulfillment of the organization's purpose, guiding principles, objectives, and activities. We have characterized our financial successes in 3 categories. Now, those categories consist of fundraising, committee and precincts, as well as financial reporting. Now, as it relates to our fundraising plan, we are excited to share that we have met 90% of our targeted fundraising goal. Now, as it relates to the fulfillment of our committee chairs and precinct captains, to date, 4 out of our 6 committees do have chairs. And out of the 23 precincts across Ward 7, we don't know how that would change once redistricting has taken shape. But I am excited to say that we do have 13 precinct captains. We're always looking for precinct captains. So if you know anybody, please send them our way. And then last but not least, to date, we have submitted 4 out of our 5 campaign finance reports on time. And with that being said, at this time, I would like to call on our Sergeant at Arms, Miss Tiffany Brown, to kind of walk us through voter registration on the next slide.
Thank you, Chair Felder. Over the last year, the Ward 7 Democrats have been busy with voter registration and turnout. We kicked off this year with the inaugural Kickball Classic, where we partnered with Ward 8 Democrats. If you attended the event, you know it was a great success. I know my fellow Commissioner Kelvin Brown is on here, and I probably still owe him another ice pack, but I'm not gonna go there. As we think of partnering with organizations, we partner with Ron Brown College High School on national voter registration to register new voters. We hosted 4 candidates forums with over 1,500 participants. We heard from those vying to be the next mayor, chair of the council, attorney general, and council at large. Lastly, we looked at the Ward 7 Democrats on the run. Look out for the Ward 7 Democrats on the run. Thank you for your support of the Ward 7 Dems. If you know someone who is not registered to vote, have them to contact the DC Board of Election. Look for us in your precincts, providing voter education and information soon. There is a primary election on June 21st. Your voice is needed. Your vote is your voice. I will now turn it over to our first Vice Chair, Dr. Delia Hasil. Take it away, Doc.
Awesome. Thank you, Sergeant at Arms Brown. When we started this journey, one of our goals was to help Ward 7 regain its political power. And that's important because it allows us to make sure that Ward 7 is at the table when decisions are being made. So over the last year, we have employed a number of different strategies to advocate for Ward 7 priorities, such as statehood, ranked choice voting, and redistricting. For example, we led and convened a coalition of Ward 7 residents to fight for an equitable population. This work also included collecting and making testimonies and convening a press release, which was pretty amazing, by the way. I see lots of folks who were involved in that press release on the call today. We also spoke out on statehood by participating in marches, rallies, and canvassing the community around this very important issue. Another important topic that we weighed in on was around ranked choice voting. For example, we passed a resolution against ranked choice voting and delivered testimonials and convened a press conference to make sure that policymakers were aware of our position on this very important issue. Now, as all of you can imagine, all of this work requires a team of committed individuals. Our initial goal was to engage at least 20 volunteers, and I'm excited to report that we doubled that goal and to date have convened a cadre of 44 volunteers to help out with our advocacy and outreach efforts. Additionally, throughout this past year, we've invited over 6 speakers to provide updates on a variety of important issues that impact Ward 7 residents. And as Ms. Brown mentioned earlier, we are still seeking volunteers and individuals to help out. So if you are ready and willing, we ask that you sign up to volunteer via the link, and we'll add that in the chat box. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to our recording secretary, Mr. Davin, to provide additional updates on our successes throughout the year.
Thank you, Dr. Hasil. Hello, everybody in the chat. The link that she just mentioned is in the chat because I'm going to speak to that link as well. Now, I am part of the illustrious comms team, in the words of our chair, and we've been concerned about 3 things: growth, growth, and more growth. You can see from all of our figures on the page, we've been doing a great job with our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and even our listservs, right? With adding more Ward 7 residents to make sure our voices are heard, right? In 2022, we know the best way to disseminate information is by social media. So please, I encourage you to send our pages to your friends, to your neighbors, so that we can build a better online network for Ward 7. And please also utilize that link as well. The comms team is also looking for help. We want to grow, right? We want to make sure we're reaching more folks. We want to make sure that our newsletter is going out to more folks. So please make sure you hit that link in the chat. Now, I'm also going to talk about community engagement. Our Sergeant at Arms, Ms. Brown, spoke about our kickball classic where we kicked Ward 8's butt. But we also had some other good times, such as the summer barbecue that we had at Earl and Karen Williams' house. We did a lot of some voter registration drives. We also did our annual coat drive. But I also want to add this: a lot of these events take money, friends. So please consider donating to the Ward 7 Dem so we can continue to bring you these amazing events. Now, I'm also going to talk to you about cultivating new and existing leadership. Now, this was something that was on our chairperson's mind. He really wanted to get the Ward 7 Dems, young Ward 7 Dems up and running. So with that, he appointed me as the interim chair for the young Ward 7 Democrats. And we're currently looking for new members as well. Right, when I came back from college, there was no real clear way for me to get involved in local politics, right? And if we want our young folks to really get involved in politics and have a say, we need to create a pipeline for them to get involved and to have their voices heard. So please, if you know of anybody who is a young Democrat, please reach out to me or hit up the link in the chat so they can sign up. Now, with existing leadership, we really saw that happening with our candidates forum. Any and everybody who took the time, who was serious enough to give their information to the Board of Elections, we wanted to hear their voice, right? Because we know it is imperative in a democracy that all voices are heard, no matter if you're a high up official who's been in office for a while or a neophyte, right? Everybody is deserved to be heard. So these are our successes or our priority areas that we really want to focus on. So please, please get in the chat and volunteer. We need your help. We want to grow. We want to help serve you. And that is all for me.
Thank you so much, Recording Secretary. Next slide, please. So as you guys can all see, this first year while in office, we have been working. And however, we also recognize that there's always areas of growth, right? With anything, we want to get better as time goes on. So with that being said, from each of our 5 key priority areas, what we've done was we've taken the liberty to kind of outline one area in which we can grow per each area. So with that being said, when we look at strengthening our infrastructure, we recognize that to ensure that we get our reports on time or properly account for our finances, we want to develop a standard operating procedures, not just for us, but for future administrations. We also recognize that precinct captains is a thing that we can improve on. We know that COVID has played an immeasurable impact on our communities. And while we do have committed leaders who are always adamant about rolling their sleeves up and getting the job done, we also recognize that some residents may not be as comfortable with serving as precinct captains or participating civically at this current moment, but we do foresee that changing. Additionally, when we look at the area of increasing voter registration and turnout, we want to make sure that we are not only targeting communities with high voting precincts, but we got to go where folks don't want to go, which is in what some folks consider low voting precincts. So with that being said, we do plan to host maybe 5 to 6 voter registration drives before the Democratic primary in low voting precincts across Ward 7. We also recognize that one area of growth within advocating for Ward 7 priorities is to capture the issues that persist across the ward, whether you live in Cayman Park, which I couldn't get off the tip of my tongue, or you live in Hillcrest, or you live in Rosedale as a new community that has been absorbed into Ward 7. We all have the same issues. And most importantly, we want to make sure that your issues are properly captured. Then when we look at areas of opportunity in optimizing communications and community engagement, ultimately we want to reach a point in which we endorse candidates. And when we endorse candidates, we want to make sure that folks across the board know what candidate or the candidates that Ward 7 support. So we're looking forward to eventually getting to a point in which we send mailers out to all residents across Ward 7. And then last but not least, I wouldn't be here if I didn't stand on the shoulders of individuals who've come before me. So when we look at areas of opportunity, specifically as it relates to cultivating new and existing leadership, I recognize how imperative it is to invest in young folks. I tell folks this all the time, metaphorically speaking, I got young legs, right? But in the next 20, 30, 40 years, I do not plan on spending my Saturday mornings with you guys. As much as I love you all on these calls, I'll probably be on a boat somewhere. So knowing that, I feel as though we need to invest in our young folks now and let them know, like, hey, there's always a space for you here at the Ward 7 Democrats organization. So with that being said, that kind of concludes areas of growth within the 5 key targeted areas. So with that being said, we're going to transition into a breakout session. And I'm going to ask my first vice chair, Dr. Hasil, if she can kind of speak to the instructions and give a overview of what the breakout session looks like and how what folks can plan to accomplish from the session. Next slide, please.
Yeah, awesome. No, we can keep it right there, actually.
Okay.
We can go back. Thank you, Chairman Felder. So now that you all have heard about our successes and opportunities for growth, we would like to hear from all of you regarding what priorities and policy agendas we should focus on during this upcoming fiscal year. So based on feedback received throughout last fiscal year, we've consistently heard about issues from residents that center around 6 key priority areas, and you'll see those noted here. The areas are education, public safety and crime, transportation, housing, economic development / job creation, and health and wellness. And so today we are asking for your help in formulating our policy agenda and guiding our activities throughout this upcoming fiscal year. Next slide, please. And here to help us frame the discussion, we have 6 dynamic Ward 7 residents that have volunteered their time to serve as moderators. First up, we have Mrs. Letitia Atkins. Mrs. Atkins will be moderating our session on economic development. Mrs. Atkins currently serves as the director of the Pennsylvania Avenue Main Street Program, a program within the Marshall Heights Community Development Organization. In this capacity, Ms. Atkins assists businesses and coordinates sustainable community-driven revitalization efforts along the Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast Corridor from the John P. Sousa Bridges to Southern Avenue Southeast. She served 2 mayors of the District of Columbia in various capacities, including her work as the executive director of the Mayor's Office on Women's Policy and Initiatives and the DC Commission for Women. In 2015, Letitia left her work in DC government and returned to her home ward to focus on community issues full-time. She established Bridges, Inc., or Building Bridges to Success Incorporated, which is a social enterprise that specializes in community development, community engagement, and community empowerment. She is currently working on various projects in Ward 7 to include projects associated with the Anacostia Waterfront Trust, the Urban Institute, the Bainham Family Foundation, and the Bainham Family Foundation. She is a proud resident of Ward 7 and a graduate of Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia, and the George Washington University Law School in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Ms. Atkins. We appreciate you. And let's show Ms. Atkins some emoji love in the chat box. All right, so next up, I'd like to introduce Mr. Charles Boston. Mr. Boston will be moderating our session on education. Mr. Boston is a longtime District and Ward 7 resident with a family history of civic engagement and a commitment to education. Charles attended Beers Elementary in the early 1980s and worked professionally in the arboriculture and rail transportation fields. Charles has attended several locally and nationally recognized universities and currently provides green workforce training and cycling skills to students at the Monroe School in Ward 7. Charles has a track record of dedication to youth development, education justice, economic empowerment, and neighborhood revitalization. Charles has spearheaded legislation for education issues in the past and recently successfully secured a grant to build the district's first bike skills course at the Hillcrest Recreation Center. Let's also show Mr. Boston some emoji love. Next up, we have Dr. Miranda Ward. Dr. Miranda Ward is an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Research and Leadership and an Emerging Scholars Fellow in Anti-Racism and Health Equity at the GW School of Medicine and Health Sciences. In this role, she designs, evaluates, and teaches health equity curriculum for undergraduate students that integrates her Equity Matters podcast. Her teaching excellence was recognized with the highest honor at GW, the 2020 Morton A. Bender Teaching Award. She was also appointed by DC Mayor Muriel Bowser to fill an advisory board seat on the Mayor's Commission on Health Equity. Miranda earned her doctorate in education from GW, her master's in public health from Tulane University, and her bachelor's degrees in sociology and anthropology from Spelman College. She enjoys learning from youth, traveling, and brunch. And Dr. Ward will be moderating our session on health and wellness. We also have Mrs. Tia Ellis, who will be moderating our session on public safety. Mrs. Ellis is a native Washingtonian and a lifelong Ward 7, aka Marshall Heights resident who has spent over 10 years working and volunteering east of the river in various human services roles. Before joining the Metropolitan Police Department in 2019 as the citywide community outreach supervisor, Mrs. Ellis served over 4 years at the Far Southeast Family Strengthening Collaborative, serving in roles such as a family support worker, intake coordinator, and program manager for the Community Engagement Division. Tia has a passion for supporting and uplifting the seniors, youth, and families in the communities that she works and lives in. Tia also holds a master's degree in management with a specialization in criminal justice management. Again, let's give Ms. Ellis and Dr. Ward some emoji love. Next up, we have Mr. Kelvin Brown, who will be moderating our session on housing. Mr. Brown is currently the Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner representing Single Member District 7B06 and a member of the Marshall Heights Community Development Organization Board of Directors. In Kelvin's professional life, he is the lead program manager for the Fannie Mae Innovation Challenge, which is a multi-million-dollar housing innovation initiative started in 2017 that serves to build resilient partnerships that lead to the creation of sustainable housing where people all across the country can age in place and thrive. He is also a decorated United States Army veteran, past president of the Fannie Mae's Veterans Employee Resource Group, and an active member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, Mu Lambda Chapter DC. Kelvin plays an integral role in ensuring his passion for helping people resonates at work, home, and in the community where he lives. In his spare time, he is an avid do-it-yourselfer, small business owner, traveler, and sports fanatic. And last but certainly not least, because I know we're ready to get into our groups, I'd like to introduce Mr. Anders Peterson. Mr. Peterson will be moderating our session on transportation. Anders is a 6-year resident of Kingman Park within Ward 7. He has worked to contribute to safe streets for all users of transportation, in particular vulnerable users such as seniors, pedestrians, and bicyclists. He previously served as chair of the transportation and committee within ANC 7D. And so again, let's give our moderators a warm welcome and thank you. Thank you all so much. Next slide, please. All right, so here we have our directions, guys. And so the directions are pretty simple. What we're going to do is break out into 6 breakout rooms. The breakout rooms will be led by all of our moderators that we mentioned earlier. Participants will be randomly assigned to one of the 6 breakout rooms. Each group will have a moderator as described, and one group member, we're asking that one group member volunteer to serve as the scribe or the individual to take notes. Moderators will then lead all of our participants through a group discussion around the priority topic areas. There are going to be two main questions that moderators are going to ask the group to weigh in on. The first question is around what issues impact those priority areas. And the second question is around what solutions do folks recommend to address those particular areas. Groups are going to have about 30 minutes or less to discuss each topic, and then we will report out for about 5 to 7 minutes per group on the general findings. Information that is gleaned from these sessions will be used to establish a policy agenda and help us chart a path forward during our upcoming fiscal year, and we plan to present the results during our May meeting. All right, so we want to make sure, next slide. So we've established some rules of engagement, right, to ensure that our breakout rooms are conducted in an orderly and productive manner. Again, we want to make sure that we maximize our time together. So our first rule is respect each other's opinion. Diversity of opinions is a good thing. It allows you to see things in a different way. So we want to make sure that we enter into this space with respect in each other's opinion. The next rule is one mic. Here, what we mean is that we would ask that only one member should speak at a time. I think we have enough people where we might have about 4 members in each group, including the moderator 5. So again, we want to make sure that we allow everyone an opportunity to speak by having only one member speak at a time. The next rule is step up, step back. Again, if you know you're one of those individuals that love to talk, we ask that you be mindful of your other group members and step back and allow them to step up to weigh in. Our next rule is that all dialogue must be constructive and productive. Again, we want everyone to remember the reason why we're here. Our goals is really to identify policy areas that will be used to guide our actions and directions, and we want to make sure that we're able to pull the most out of the group in that manner. Our next rule is to speak your truth and be authentic. Again, there are no right or wrong answers. Everyone has different perspectives. We have different backgrounds. We want to make sure that people feel safe speaking their truth. And then last, but certainly not least, we're asking everyone to reach agreement. Again, there's going to be multiple people in these groups with multiple ideas. Our goal today, or our task and challenge for all of you, is to come to a consensus on what items you want to put forward and report out at the end of the session. So I know that was a lot. I'm going to pause and see if anyone has any questions. All right. So hearing none, we are going to be breaking people up into groups. I'd like to ask our recording secretary, I'm assuming, are you going to be assisting with that?
Yes, so I'm about to open the rooms now. I just want to remind the moderators to please press record once you get into your rooms. Please give me a thumbs up if you have your rooms. Excellent.
So, Mr. Recording Secretary Davin, are we assigning people that are unassigned?
Yes, so as people come in, I will be putting them in a row.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Please hit the join the room section, please. If you're on the call, make sure you hit that button. Delia, excuse me, First Vice Chair, are you familiar with working the breakout rooms?
Yes, I am. I'm actually assigning people as well, just to get them in there as quickly as possible.
Excellent, thank you. I have Tia asking for help in her room, so I will be right back.
Okay, awesome. Now we'll go ahead and continue to get people in those rooms.
Delia, this is Sharona. I don't have the select room option.
Okay, let me see if I can get you in, Sharona.
Okay.
And I know education is your space, but are you okay with going to another room?
I'll go wherever you want me to go. You definitely know me, but I will go wherever you want me to go.
All right, I appreciate that,
Public
your
safety is fine
flexibility.
too.
Okay,
Yep. Okay,
all
thank
right.
you.
So I just tried to ask you to sign, for whatever reason, it didn't, sign there.
Hey, Miss, First Vice Chair, everything
Mhm.
okay?
Yes, everything is fine. I think I'm still having issues with getting Sharona in a room.
Okay. What room were you planning on putting her in?
Oh, she just got in. She just
Cool.
got in. Perfect.
I guess I'm not supposed to be assigned to a room, which is fine. I'll just be out here
Oh,
just,
do you want to sit in the economic development room? Just listen in. I only have 3 people.
sure,
The only one that has 3 people.
sure. Thank you, First
All
Vice.
right, thank you. All
Delia,
right.
you want me in public safety?
Yes, that would be
Random.
fine.
Okay, okay.
What's
that's
up, Tish?
Hey, so the 2 folks that were supposed to be in the room, they haven't joined. I'm assuming that they may not have been automatically put in the room. And I don't know if folks are going into the rooms. If they have to select to go into the room themselves, they may not have pushed that button. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
in there by myself, so but
Okay.
I'll try to head back in and see who shows up.
No,
Okay.
no, you're actually correct though.
Yeah,
When
they
Bell is in
seem to
that
be
room?
waiting.
Okay.
We give us a minute. We're gonna just give people time to settle in.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, that they've been assigned, they just haven't joined.
Correct.
Mhm. Yeah. All right, I think some folks are having trouble joining. I know this would be expected. I see health is off and running. Antoine Holmes, if you can hear me, please join your respective breakout room. Housing is just 2 people, Tara Maxwell isn't in there yet. Yeah. So, let's see, Tara, if you can hear me, Fayette, if you can hear me, Antoine, Tyrell, Brandon, you all could please join your respective breakout rooms. That would be great. Tara Maxwell, if you can hear the sound of my voice.
What breakout room do I need to join?
I think maybe what we could do is move them, which room, I want to move them back to the people who have not joined. Let me check, I don't have, I think I see Tyrell who hasn't joined. I'm just texting, sorry. All right, so Tara, what's his name? Lawrence, Brandon, are you can you please join the economic development room, or can you do housing? Oh, you want to join housing, Brandon?
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, because I don't have you, let me send you, because I know they're waiting for someone, so I think you're waiting on, you should have gotten a notice to join in. Did you get it? Yep, he's in, perfect. All right, Mr. Holmes. Antoine. I think he's supposed to be in transportation. We don't see that you have joined transportation yet. We also have Tyrell and Tara Maxwell. I'm gonna try to reach out to those individuals.
vacated. Okay, okay.
Hey,
That-
Fayette,
Yes. Or is,
are you joining any other breakout rooms? I think they're waiting to, if you want to, I think you were assigned to,
public safety.
no, I have you, I think public safety is full. Are you okay with going to economic development?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm gonna, you should see something pop up on your screen. Then if you select that, then you could go right ahead into that group. Did you select it? Yes, perfect. All right. Carol, Ariel, Antoine, Mr. Holmes, are you on the line? I don't see you. I see, are you on the line? All right, a few people that have not been able to join. All right, Antoine, Kara, Tyrell, we're asking if you could join your breakout groups. That would be helpful. I know we are recording live, so those of you who are on the call, we are currently in our breakout groups. If you are interested in joining one of our breakout groups, we ask that you log into our call and we will assign you to one of the 6 breakout groups that our teams are discussing. Hi, Tara. Tara, how are you? Can you please join your respective group? Hi, Jimmy, how are you? So we are in breakout rooms right now. Everyone is having their discussions. I can assign you into one if you're okay with that. I think the econ has about 3 people in it. Hi, Jimmy, can you hear me? Uh, Hi, Jimmy, can you hear me? All right, for those of you who may be joining us on Facebook Live, currently we have 6 concurrent breakout rooms in progress. Our topics are on economic development, housing, education, public safety, health and wellness, transportation. Those groups are happening now. We will be pulling everyone back into our main room within the next 5 minutes, where groups will be responsible for reporting out their findings. Hi, Jimmy, how are you? Hi, Jimmy, how's it going? Hi, Jimmy, how are you? Perfect. All right, perfect. He's joined the group.
Celia, you're muted if you're talking.
Yes, ma'am, I am. So good afternoon, everyone. I hope that folks are coming back in. I see some groups are still having wrapping up their discussion. So everyone should be back in the main room in a few seconds here. I hope that everyone enjoyed their time in their breakout rooms. I was able to join many of the groups and heard some very robust discussions. So kudos to all of you. And before we get to our breakouts, let's give our moderators and all of you another virtual round of applause. I really appreciate you all stepping up and volunteering your time on the Saturday morning to do that. Now, okay, I think I'm going to move him back in here. So, okay, awesome. All right, so with that, we'd like to have our breakout, our moderators share some of the things that they discussed in their groups. Do we have a volunteer? Mr. Chairman, I see you all. Did you have anything you wanted to share before we get into breakouts?
No,
Nope.
we're good to go.
Awesome. So we're going to start we're going to actually ask if there are any moderators that like to volunteer to go first. Commissioner Brown, I see your hand raised. All right. I love it.
I'll go next.
Okay.
After Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Wood. Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Brown. Floor is
It was
yours.
more so because I have another next meeting to jump to, but I definitely wanted to thank the participants who shared their thoughts and their experience with us around the housing issue. So it was a very engaging conversation, and it was a very challenging conversation from the standpoint that we left with some accountability, right? What can we individually do and collectively do as a group across not only our individual communities, but across the board to help increase the overall percentage of Black households who are actually owners. And so I opened the conversation with the statistic that 42% of residents in Ward 7 are homeowners, which means that 58% of homeowners are renters, which means that there's an opportunity loss of being able to enjoy many financial freedoms that are associated with the joy of home ownership and overall wealth building and estate planning, et cetera. So some of the things that we heard in the conversation was that there is an inherent and historical distrust of governmental organizations, systems, and financial institutions that has permeated the Black community as a whole. And so one of the solutions that we talked about as a way to help combat that is that we should identify those members within our communities who already have existing relationships that we can leverage to be able to get information into those potential renters that are potential home buyers to make sure that they can participate in the process around buyer education, working with a phenomenal realtor like Mr. Scott, being able to develop a relationship with the lender, being able to make sure that they have education and literacy around the importance of that all-important FICO score. The second topic that we talked about was ensuring that potential buyers that have been renting for 10, 15, 20 years, making sure that we advocate for policies that include positive rental payment history as a factor in the credit scoring decision, so that when the renters or homeowners look to refinance or apply for a HELOC or any other financial product to either improve their home or pay for an expense like going to college or making an investment in small businesses, that they have the best rates, the best information, and that they can make a informed decision. The other thing that we talked about is that we all have a vast background of experience through our professional lives, through our personal lives. We have networks, and there's an opportunity to leverage our hyper-local elected officials as conduits to really help drive the conversation around home ownership and really building out what it looks like to move from rental to potential buyer to home stability. So those are some of the things that we talked about. And I think one of the things we said is that this cannot be the last conversation, because we do understand that Ward 7 and Ward 8 is really the last kind of frontier for Black home ownership. And one of the other things I did mention is I saw in the statistic is that Black home ownership rates in every ward except Ward 7 and 8 has decreased by over 30 to 50%. So that means that there's a material difference in the number of Black homeowners west of the river than there is east of the river. And so Ward 7 and Ward 8 is truly the last frontier of Black home ownership opportunity and opportunities for us to build wealth as a community. So I'll just pause there to see if there are any thoughts, additional feedback from my cohort that were speaking on housing, or just the community on this call as a whole.
All right, awesome job. Let's give them a round of applause. I wish we was in person. Thank you so much, Commissioner Brown. That was some phenomenal feedback. I got a lot of great ideas. So that information will prove useful to all of us as we think about what a chart for a path forward looks like. All right, so I think next up, Dr. Ward, and then we'll have Mrs. Ellis.
All right, hello everyone. So first, I just want to thank Rhonda and Felicia and Adam for such a lively discussion. So yeah, I'm just going to summarize what we discussed, which is the fact we did actually come up with 3 key, priority areas, but only 2 solutions. And the last one, we just ran out of time and we only had 30 minutes. So first things first. We did have a chance to really kind of talk about, the landscape of health in our ward, starting with healthcare access in particular, and how really historically there's been uneven access to hospitals, as well as outpatient care services. And so, yes, the mayor has allocated, some funds with obviously the new hospital, Cedar Hill Regional Medical Center being, built in Ward 8, which it's definitely going to benefit us here in Ward 7. But, part of the funds that's been allocated is to actually create a new urgent care center, which has since opened up right here in Ward 7, 4017 Minnesota Avenue is MBI, which is specifically a mental health, behavioral health clinic. And so we talked about, the importance of mental health in particular, right? We started there. And so, yes, actually one of those, like Adam in particular, could attest to, given the work that he does, that, they do really great services, have a lot of wraparound social support. But the thing is that, as our proposed solution is that we really need to take a step back and think about creating more advocacy and educational messaging on mental health. Because it's one thing is we can't even get to accessing, these kind of wraparound programs because there's a stigma associated with mental health. So first of all, we need to help to destigmatize mental health, 1. 2, have more education and outreach around what mental health is, right? From primary, just kind of thinking about therapy and, talking to someone, but also actually addressing a substance use disorder or, a mental health disorder. And so there's just multiple threads there to really kind of educate what is mental health. And then also really thinking about, the fact that some people literally have to pay out of pocket to even access a mental health provider. They don't have insurance for it, like how you navigate the mental health, so for all of those reasons, we think that there really needs to be some type of robust education and advocacy around what is mental health and how do you access mental health, right? Just the various access points. And that really, we think that by doing that, we will then be able to address the trickle down effect that has on, residents that are managing and struggling with addiction, and then we know, because basically there's literature that talks about the fact that, people are self-coping. And one of the themes that came up in our discussion was the fact that, yes, we are in a group talking about health and wellness, but literally all of the other breakout groups topics around housing and economic security is very much interconnected with health, right? We really can't have the discussions, separately. I mean, for the purposes of this discussion, yes, but literally all of these other factors weigh in on your health outcomes. And so That being said, we felt like talking about mental health is really important up front to prioritize that. And then the other, and then also that would also allow for us to address, our homelessness population. And really thinking about accessibility, like for example, somebody who is, living in, who's homeless, how would they access mental health programs, right? Somebody who's in transitional housing programs, like how would they access mental health programs? Somebody who maybe you're not in those programs, but you just, don't know. So it's just really hard to navigate that without like some type of education outreach. So that was the first one. Then we also talked about food access. So we know that Ward 7 is a food, like we're experiencing food apartheid. Actually, me and Rhonda, Felicia, and Adam, we were naming injustice for what it is. Okay, so we're not mincing words. So we most certainly are facing food apartheid because decisions have been made strategically and structurally and historically to deprive our neighborhoods of nutritious foods. And we know that we've been deprived because we can look at, for example, Ward 6 has 10 grocery stores, right? Ward 2 has 7, Ward 1 has 8, we have 2. Right. So we know it's possible to actually have the amount of grocery stores that you need, like literally 1 grocery store per 10,000 residents, but we don't have that. So food access is really important. Yes, the mayor has since created a $58 million food access grant for Ward 7 and 8, and already has rolled out $9 million, and Ward 8 got the new grocery stores, and they have 2, right? So we another solution that Ward 7 Dems can get around is really petitioning the city council around establishing eminent domain so that we could, for example, like in Fort DuPont area, there was talks of putting a new grocery store there, right? And the thing is that we looked up some of the leading causes of death in our ward, and a lot of them are preventable. If you think about the fact that we have the second lowest life expectancy rate in the district, and a lot of that premature death is connected to chronic conditions that are connected to poor diet and poor access to nutritious food. So again, food access very much is connected to the high rates of heart disease and the other poor health outcomes that we see. And then the last issue that we addressed was, or at least named, was safety and crime. Again, we didn't have time to kind of come up with a solution because obviously that's like a lot going on with that, but we recognized it as something that lots of residents just don't feel safe. And there's lots of crime being reported. And that obviously also affects mental health. That also affects, social connectedness. That also affects, if you're going to be, going out walking and being, kind of physically active, if you don't feel safe in your neighborhoods. So they're interconnected. And so those are the 3 pressing priority issues. And I'm happy to share a little bit more of my notes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Ward. It sounds like you all also had a very robust discussion and got a lot of great feedback. So thank you so much. All right, next up is Mrs. Ellis, who will present out for the public safety breakout group.
Thank you. So Ms. Grant, Ms. Odom, and Ms. Brown and I, we're a small group, but we had a very powerful discussion around public safety in the ward. And we came up with our 3 identified priority areas around public safety. So but we started off with the discussion understanding that public safety and crime looks different across the ward. And with that understanding, what are some areas that we deem has impacted the ward in across the board in impactful ways? So the first bucket that we came up with was traffic safety and the lawlessness of speeding in various neighborhoods, and how the fatalities, the incidents, et cetera, that results from that, just the fear of crossing the street, et cetera, that encompasses that kind of priority area, and the need to put things in place and modify things that are in place to support this area. So one solution that we came up with for this area is to educate the public on speeding laws. So maybe that's something that this collective can come up with to host meetings, et cetera, to be intentional about educating public on speed law. And then possibly increasing penalties from those infractions to further deter those crimes. Also, establishing alternatives to the signs or speed bumps that are in place, not removing them, but adding to them because they don't always prove effective. So maybe implementing something such as a yellow hazard lights to further kind of catch people's attention and deter that behavior. The next bucket that we discussed was violent crime. And violent crime has even impacted areas that had been used to violent crime in the past in the war, which is often a direct result of just the different changes that we've experienced since COVID. So, and we discussed different neighborhoods that have been historically plagued with crime and what things we can do to assist those neighborhoods and then kind of reduce these neighborhoods that haven't been historically plagued with crime and kind of figure out what's going on here and to further deter that. So solutions that we came up with in those areas is to create protective community measures. So safe passage. So not just safe passage from school to the bus stop or whatever, actually safe passage, walking with youth or individual youth or young adults, etc. And in the neighborhoods, have those discussions, being visible and available outside in your communities. And if you see, a youth or have you, alone, or if you are familiar with that youth, kind of having those discussions and checking in. Another solution that was discussed is street outreach and changing those community norms. So we discussed that street outreach needs to be a collaborative effort. So bringing in different stakeholders, whether that's MPD, DBH, et cetera, to walk the neighborhoods and have that visibility and presence throughout the communities to kind of deter those behaviors, which are likely not to happen if they see a constant and consistent visibility of their neighbors, walking through the community, and then the neighbors then bringing in those different community stakeholders in the community. The last bucket, but certainly not least, priority area we discussed was youth crime and how it has just become out of control, especially during this time of COVID and virtual learning and the not having access to youth recreation centers or those traditional youth programming that has been widely available in the past due to COVID restrictions, et cetera. So, and just identifying what those kind of youth committed crimes, like violent crime to petty crime, from robberies, armed robberies, package theft, auto theft, carjacking, shootings, and stabbings, and the understanding that the need to address this and catch it early on, because youth committing crimes, that it's a higher percentage that they turn into adults committing crimes. And some solutions that we discussed to add on to some of the solutions we discussed to address that is the first bucket is preventative measures. So parenting classes, engaging with the parents, seeing, addressing it from a household perspective, getting the parents involved in the process and involved and invested in their children and youth lives, advocating for and committing to these proposals that we hear thrown around for 24-hour rec centers. Let's advocate and get those established in our communities. Mentorship programs and being consistent in those mentorship programs. And then also conflict resolution, which having it as a preventative measure, because certain youth or families may not really know how to handle conflict, and they just go with what they know or what has been their neighborhood or community norms. The second bucket is the rehabilitative measures. So identify that, okay, there is a need to address this youth, for lack of a better term, try to save this youth from a future life of crime or just going, or, not being with us in the future. So youth counseling, kind of getting to the nitty gritty of understanding what that youth is experiencing. How can we address it? Is it mental? Is it behavioral? Is it environmental, social, etc.? And then also educating the youth on certain behavior norms, etc., therapy programs. And then another big bucket that we discussed is grief counseling. A lot of youth in this time have been plagued with dealing with death, whether it's from the pandemic, whether it's from their friends, being victims of violent crimes, etc., and not knowing how to deal with that. And then they act out, then that turns into something else or looks different because they don't know how to deal with that grief, whatever that grief may look like, result from. And then we also added into the bucket of rehabilitative measures, just like preventative measures, mentorship. So addressing at the front end before it even thing, and then also understanding that once they end up in an area of crime, having those mentors that can be those positive influences in their life to kind of change their path, which has proven to be impactful in a few situations. So I'm going to stop there. Anybody else from the group want to chime in, but I think I did a good kind of snapshot of what we discussed.
You did. Thanks, Tia.
Awesome. Thank
Okay,
you. That was amazing as well. Great information. Thank you so much, Ms. Alice, for moderating that group. And we look forward to taking those results and building them out into a larger plan. I see Ms. Atkins has her hand raised. Would you like to go next?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. So as you know, I facilitated the very lively discussion around economic development. And we started with framing what exactly is economic development and looking at a definition that we could all build from. And if I may, I would like to share that according to the International Economic Development Council, economic development is defined as the practice of improving a community's economic well-being and quality of life. At its core is building a robust, resilient, and inclusive economy. And so we started with looking at some data points, some key data points, and most importantly, looking at the mayor's proposed FY23 capital improvement budget, which includes a 6-year capital improvement plan. Out of those 13 projects that are included in the proposed budget, 3 of them directly impact Ward 7. The first one being the New Communities Initiative, where the mayor's proposing $82.5 million to go into distressed subsidized housing properties and to redevelop those communities into mixed use, mixed income properties. Of course, you know, Ward 7 has the Lincoln Heights Richardson Dwellings New Communities Initiative. And so not exactly sure how much of that $82.5 million will be designated towards Ward 7, but we did, start with that premise that that is one project that will impact economic development in the community. Also, the 3rd largest parcel of land that the district is seeking to redevelop is here in Ward 7, the Fletcher Johnson property. The mayor is proposing $2.5 million over the course of through this 6-year capital plan. That money be invested into that project specifically. And then the 3rd project is the Hill East project, where the mayor is proposing that approximately $116 million over the course of the next 6 years be invested into that property. And so one of the things that we talked about is we comparing apples to apples, Hill East being in Ward 7 and Fletcher Johnson being in Ward 7. We do know that geographically, however, Hill East is west of the river, and as described by the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, is a neighborhood that is closely aligned with the Capitol Hill community. So again, there's a huge disparity in even the amount of investment from Fletcher Johnson to Hill East, with Fletcher Johnson being the 3rd largest parcel of land, 3rd only to the McMillan site, which 20 million is proposed to be invested over the course of the 6 years, and then the Walter Reed property, which is the largest, and I do not have those numbers, but one of the things that we immediately honed in on was equity and ensuring that the Ward 7 receives adequate and equally distribution of funding when it comes to these types of economic development opportunities. And again, just looking at that data and just the huge disparities there alone. The second piece was how is the community, how's the community involved in these discussions? So ensuring that one, the community is there to support, or either buy-in from the community is there from day one when we talk about these economic development projects. So one, how do we use tools such as community benefits agreements, community workforce development agreements to ensure that residents are not only involved in the planning, but residents get to benefit from these projects. And then thirdly, was the question of access. We know the economic development includes a number of different things. Again, that is, just the viability of the community, the residents, and our small businesses. So how are our small businesses, our small business communities being involved in these projects? One of access, educating these businesses about what's in the pipeline in terms of development and how these businesses can get prepared to prosper from this economic development also. So again, we looked at this conversation really hinged a lot on equity and equitable development. And then we closed with, we understand that economic development, we have to approach this delicately, right? We don't want to be seen as, wow, I think I heard Calvin mention it earlier, Ward 7 and 8 can be seen as the last frontier when it comes to economic development. But yes, we do want economic development because we want our entire community to prosper. We do not want to be seen as a community that has an overabundance of affordable housing, because that could run the risk of, not saying that it will, but the conversation came up that could run the risk of us seeing additional concentrated poverty in areas in the community if we are not careful. Again, going back to this conversation of equitability and equity. So I think I captured that. My group is still here. I had the chair in the conversation, which he added a lot of lively conversation. I actually was blessed. I had two chairs, the previous chair of the Ward 7 Democrats, Jimmy Williams, and the current chair, Wendell. So there was a lot of added and lively conversation around the economic development component.
Awesome. Thanks, Ms. Atkins. Again, really great and rich information. I'm just amazed at how much info we have. We're definitely going to need the moderator support as we pull together this information into policy agendas and position statements. So thank you so much for leading that rich and robust discussion. So two more groups. We have Anders or Mr. Boston. Which one of you all want to go next? I don't see any hands raised.
I'm happy to raise my hand.
Okay. Go ahead, Anders.
Great. So we had a really lively discussion that really centered around transportation equity, safer streets, and access, especially for many of our seniors who may not have access to their own car. So we talked. So let me start with the first issue, which was speeding and transportation issues. We're really seeing a lot of reckless driving, a lot of dangerous driving, and we're seeing a lot of commuter traffic coming through Ward 7. And the DDOT today is really not doing enough to calm speeding and to address it from an infrastructure point of view. It's one thing to put out cameras, but cameras themselves don't make changes in behavior. In order to get changed car behavior and speeding, we really need better infrastructure. So let's talk about some of the solutions for that. We need greater creativity from DDOT. We're seeing today that DDOT is too often applying various excuses around federal highway standards when they want to make a justification for why a street can't get a speed bump or can't get a bump out that can make it more safe to cross the street. So DDOT needs to be more creative. They also need to really step up the game with raised crosswalks that can be really good for folks, children heading to schools or for seniors. We're seeing raised crosswalks deployed in other parts of the city, and yet DDOT is hesitating and deploying them in Ward 7. So they need to step up there. We need protected bike lanes on stretches such as the East Capitol Street, which will be redesigned in coming years in a large capital project. Again, we're seeing DDOT not stepping up and delivering the protected bike lanes that could make it more accessible and more equitable. And the tendency and for why DDOT is not doing it, we don't really get clear answers, but one of them seems to be that they're prioritizing commuters over the safety of DC residents and Ward 7 residents. Second, we talked a lot about improved public transport. We talked a lot about improving bus services and improving the streetcar. We need more regular, the services today are really hampered by the fact of regularity, how frequent they run. And to our seniors who are going and shopping, for example, using the bus, they are having access issues and sometimes getting on the bus with their groceries, etc. So what do we need to do? We need more regular bus services. We need that the bus services really step up the service level. Patricia in our group mentioned the example from LA County where the buses have Wi-Fi services. Why don't we have Wi-Fi on WMATA buses and on the streetcar? That's an area that could be improved. Another program we talked about was the DC Connect that can help with connectivity to the bus services for folks with accessibility issues. Again, that's a program that could step it up and where we would benefit if DC Connect worked better. So those were some of the suggestions, but really highlighted around focusing on equity, focusing on safety, focusing on many of the households in Ward 7 that doesn't own a car, and that those folks should not get left behind by both our infrastructure design that DDOT oversees and by the fact that we need better bus and public transport.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Peterson. Sounds like there was another rich and robust discussion with lots of information to unpack. So thank you again so much for your leadership there. Last but certainly not least, I want to turn it over to Mr. Boston to report out on the education breakout group.
Yes. Well, I want to first thank Marla and Melissa. We had a very engaging conversation and challenging conversation about education. And when you think about education, you know, all the other priority areas, if you really think about them, they start with education, such as behaviors in driving, public safety, you know, as far as having values for your community and your neighbors, being in a good quality of health, being introduced to, you know, foods and so forth that will offset or prevent diabetes, hypertension, all of these issues, economic security and so forth and so on, as well as housing, home ownership. A strong education is very important, and more importantly, student achievement. You know, we really focused in on one of the biggest issues that's often missing, and that's parental involvement and support. And so, you know, not just being involved as far as with the bake sales and so forth, but, you know, monitoring what your children are watching on TV, who their peers are, you know, going to the library with them and so forth and so on, and really trying to help out, you know, and complement and reinforce what's coming out of the classroom. And so one of the things that we focused on was better marketing to parents. We know we have a lot of parents that are young, less mature, and we have to find ways to market and get to and help them out in areas that they may need help if they so need it. And so if they have children that's playing football at the rec center, and we know that we have issues with, you know, our health, offer, healthier cooking classes and things of that nature. Not saying that you don't know how to cook, Mom, but we're offering some other things that could be beneficial, or that you may, that may help your household. In dealing with some of the challenges that we have, not to speak from a negative approach, use strength-based language, kind of uplift and speak more to the positive things that are occurring within the community, so people can see them and inspire to, to be of that mindset. Solidify the home. Again, a lot of homes are struggling, and so find ways, reaching out to students, see what they need, what they may be lacking, and what could benefit them at home as well as in school. At the end of the day, education was formed by churches in this country, and so we want to see more churches involved. They have a lot of green space that could be used for gardening, that could be used just for recreational uses. They have a lot of indoor spaces as far as their auditoriums and basements that could be used for a whole host of crafts and activities and to provide safe spaces. We want to see more churches involved and less signs far as them being for sale. And civic associations as well. We just need more interaction. I think that will solidify the education. It will encourage our young people to learn and see a future for themselves. We're kind of at a crossroad to where a lot of children, a lot of students don't really see what the current education system can offer them. And so ways to improve that is, again, to get the community more engaged and involved, and to pay attention in what's going on within the schools, and to invest into our students' lives in the ward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Boston. Again, sounds like you all had a very robust discussion around education. And so again, let's just I want to just thank everyone again for just taking the time. I know it's been a long day. And so we appreciate you sticking with us and taking the time to weigh in on these very important issues. Before we wrap up, we are going to put a poll in the chat just to get a pulse check from everyone. Out of these 6 areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think we're missing one. We are missing one. I'm looking at education, transportation. I think we're missing housing. But out of the 5 that you see, which one do we think is one of the most important areas? I know it's hard to just choose one, but wanted to just get a post check from folks to see what folks think. Everyone should be seeing a poll in the chat. Please respond. And if housing is your area, you could drop that in the chat box. All right. So it looks like we have about a pretty evenly split. Well, I see a lot coming in for education. And again, this is just to get a post check. Our aim, as I reiterated earlier, is to develop a policy agenda with potential position statements around each of these priority areas. We may be reaching back out to many of you on the call. Definitely our moderators will be reaching out to all of you to help us shape and influence and inform those reports. So again, thank you all so much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our to Chairman Felder to close us out.
Well, thank you so much, First Vice Chair, for kind of walking folks through what they can expect with the 2022 annual convention. I profusely thank all of the moderators once again, as well as all of the residents who have stuck around on this call to not only go through our general body meeting, but to also transition into the convention. I know that there's a lot of things happening across the ward. I'm in front of Deanwood right now. I know that there's an event, and I also know that Councilmember Gray is having his leadership call right now as well. So I just want to thank everyone. And at this point in time, before we conclude today's meeting, I just wanted to allot time for community announcements if residents have any. Well, hearing none.
Hi, actually, I have a community announcement. This is Patricia Stamper from Deanwood. Hi. This year, Deanwood is bringing back Deanwood Day. Yay! It will take place May 21st. It's a Saturday at Idea Public Charter School from 9 to 3. the theme this year is wellness. We're coming out of pandemic, and we want to focus on our wellness as a whole, as a community, and as hashtag our Deanwood. So come out May 21st from 9 to 3 and celebrate Deanwood Day with the theme being wellness here in Deanwood. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that announcement, Ms. Stamper. Any other community announcements?
Vice Chair has her hand up.
Yes, I want to invite everyone. I know we talked about housing. The Advisory Neighborhood Commission 7E is hosting a workshop on housing on Monday from 6 to 8 p.m. The workshop is going to be led by Lydia's House, and individuals will be able to earn a certificate of orientation, which is one of the steps required to participate in the HPAP program. So please tell all of any residents that you know that are interested in buying a home about it, or that are interested in the HPAP program. Again, that's going to be on Monday from 6 to 8. You can, the registration information can be found on the ANC 70's website, which I will drop in the chat. But those of you who just want to Google it, you can always say Advisory Neighborhood Commission 70, and that site should come up. Thank you.
Thank you, First Vice Chair. Any other announcements? Okay, hearing now, that concludes this morning's meeting. Once again, thank you all for your patience and sticking around with us. Have a fantastic Saturday and enjoy your weekend. And stay tuned for more stuff rolling out by the Ward 7 Dems. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.